Hello, everybody, and welcome to International Podcast Day's Podcaster Showcase. This is a monthly live broadcast brought to you by the International Podcast Day team. I am Dave Lee, co-founder of International Podcast Day, and thanks for joining us today. As you know, each month we showcase podcasters and voices from around the world, and this broadcast, of course, is no different. And whether you're watching live or checking out the recording, welcome to the broadcast. A quick reminder, make sure that you head over to internationalpodcastday.com/podcaster-showcase. You can see those up on the screen. And we've showcased plenty of talent from around the world, and it's great to have everybody showcased, and it's some really good content over there, so make sure you go over there. So this week I wanted to welcome in the amazing Romina. She is founder and CEO of 6-7 Radius. She's producer and host of Coffee with Romina. She is also a sales and negotiating expert. She is a PR and communications consultant. And during this broadcast, we're going to be sharing R&D approaches that podcast hosts can use to leverage their skills on starting a business via podcasting. So we're going to dive into it here in just a minute. So let's get started. Welcome to the Podcaster Showcase. Romina, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure being here.
Absolutely. Well, I want to share a little bit of screen here so that our folks out here know exactly where they can connect you with. While I'm doing that, why don't you introduce yourself to the International Podcast Day community?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Romina with a weird long last name. So the best way how to get a hold of me everywhere is literally just connect with Romina. Romina. It's my name spelled. I am the host of Coffee with Romina podcast, or you might know it as RM Podcast FL, because I started podcasting literally because I hated my job and I wanted to run away and I needed like a hobby. So started podcasting, and tomorrow will be actually 2 years that I've podcasted. The name changed a couple of months ago, and since the name and the marketing and the whole strategy of it changed, we have seen the podcast be in top 100s, top 200s, Apple Podcast charts internationally. So it's a lot of improvement. So what I'm trying to say with that too is, if you start a podcast just because you just wanted to, or you wanted to explore with it, it's okay to re-strategize and don't be too hard on yourself. Like if you just change one or two things and tweak it around, you will be able to see the benefits of it later on down the road. As well as I am the founder of 6-7 Radius. I started my business because of podcasting, which we'll actually get into it, talking about the R&D approaches that every podcast host can definitely go ahead and follow, or try to make their own mini packages or their their own services from it, which will go more in detail. And if you are wondering where I'm from because of my weird last name, and people tell me I have an accent, so if you hear an accent so far, I am Albanian originally. I did move to America at 17 years old by myself. Not sure how my parents let me do that. I don't know if they like my brother more or they had enough of me. But on August will be 12 years that I live in the States.
Sorry about that. Had a little technical issue on the backside. So welcome. I think it's fantastic. You and I were able to connect over on Instagram, and I believe you and I both spoke at the Pod Fiesta conference. That was one of the most recent
Australia.
Yep, and that was really cool. So I was able to tune in and listen to your presentation, and there was just so much good talent that was on display there, yours included. And so it's always good. It's always good to connect and see that other people
it was a great event, and I'm really happy to see that podcasting is growing more and more. I've spoken at PodFest multiple times, but Pod Fiesta, it's an Australian organization that has it, and they did such an amazing job at putting everything together. It was their first time, and I'm so proud of the guys that put everything together. Michael did an amazing, phenomenal job with a whole team there.
Yeah, he did. It was really great, and I just happened to follow them on social media, and I reached out and I shared, I think, their post in one of our Instagram stories or Twitter, and he reached out automatically. He's like, "Hey, you want to be a part of this event?" And I'm like, "Sure, absolutely." So, podcasters in organizations or organizers helping each other, and that's what
somebody had sent him a post that I put on LinkedIn regarding podcasting. And he's like, "Hey, I listened to your podcast. I checked it out. I'd love to actually see if you would be interested." So just, you never know the connections within the organizations, or people sometimes like, "Oh, nobody liked my post," or nobody like engaged with it. But even that one person, you just never know who's going to listen to your episode, who's going to read your post, or who's actually going to be able to see what content you put out there, because literally even one person can change the whole trajectory of it. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to share the link with Podfiesta to their Facebook page, just so everybody's out there can kind of go check them out. And I know it's that they're getting off first year in no matter what you're doing, starting a business, starting a podcast, organizing an event, producing anything. The first year is always the hardest. And so it seems like I am right there to help support, help build, help start that community getting going. So
Absolutely.
yeah, well, let's go ahead and dive into this. And I'm really excited when you sent over the topic that you want to talk about. And we're going to be talking about R&D approaches that podcast hosts can use to leverage their skills on starting a business via podcasting. And you shared with me a little bit before that you quit your job, you started in this new adventure, and that kind of lends you to a very particular lens and a very different sort of angle to these things. So I'll let you sort of kick off the conversation here and provide some of those approaches that our audience members can take hold of.
Yeah, absolutely. So to just kind of refresh, like I said earlier, I started podcasting because I wanted a runaway from my job. I was working sales. I was one of the top salespeople. I've worked sales for almost over 11 years at this point. And I was really great, but it came to a point that I was like a little machine doing the same thing over and over. And I had a lot more skills than a good sales professional would, because at the same time, I'm attending school, I'm attending conferences, I'm trying to learn as much as possible. I'm just a very curious person. Like, I want to know everything under the sun, or if something like it triggers my, my interest, I want to learn more. So after getting turned down multiple times from a managerial position, I created an exit strategy. But before I even did that, though, I started podcasting. I was like, I am sure I'm not the only person in the world that is going through this or has gone through this. I'm sure somebody else out there has gone through obstacles or has gone through challenges for them to be where they want to be. Because at first, whenever we have an issue, we think we're the only person in the world that is going through that. And we're like, oh my God, like my life sucks. No, you guys, everybody has their own struggles. So to kind of dive in more a little bit deep, I reached out to my connections, because at the same time, I was the president for Florida State College at Jacksonville for SHRM, Society Human Resource Management student chapter. So my job was to organize life events, and we would have HR professionals or attorneys or different professionals that would be business and HR related come and speak on this event. So I was like, how about I reach out to my connections that are here locally and ask them, how did you go about being at the career that you have? What were some of the obstacles that you had? What advice would you give somebody that is at this position right now? So I was asking questions a little bit from a selfish point of view at first, because that's something that I was going through, but I didn't want to say it out loud because I felt like something was wrong with me if I said it out loud. But at the same time, like, I'm sure somebody else is going through this. So I asked questions and I asked questions. And the more I started doing, it kind of got to me. I was like, well, one more episode. Well, I'll do one more. Well, this is kind of cool. I'll do one more. And then little did I know, the podcasts are going out there, and I'm just connecting with this amazing professionals on LinkedIn. I have people that never before give me the time of the day, but because now I had a platform, they would be like, okay, I'm really interested. Like, what do you have to say? Like, what do you think the audience want? And then I started studying the audience a lot more towards, okay, like, what are we actually going to do here? Because this started as a fun thing, as a runaway, but now it's turning into a real big project. And then COVID hit, unfortunately. If you've watched the news, we kind of going through a global pandemic, and 2020 was like a year condensed, like a 5 years condensed in one. So it was like a year on steroids, I say all the time. And I had to change a lot of things. So what I started doing is whatever I would do when I put the life event, or whenever I would do when I worked sales, it's what is the customer wanting, right? And what can I sell to the customer? What can I provide to them? And I was like, how about I do this? I have a lot of skills. What are my guests missing? Because they are professionals, but they're running all the time, or they have one or two assistant or one or two, people on their team, but they're not expert on the other topics. So I was like, I come from a sales and marketing area, and I'm really like, at this point, I'm a year into podcasting. What do I see the podcasters want? What are those interviews maybe that I'm like, I don't even want to launch this interview. I wish the guest knew this. So by looking and studying at what was missing to make the whole interviewing process perfect, and what was missing from the clients that they would love to learn more, I start putting packages together. So I would say, for instance, I would have a client that just published a book, and they're on their consulting firm. They've been, experts for years. But when it came to the PR, they didn't have a lot of exposure. And with everything through COVID changing to online, they didn't have that media exposure. So I was like, okay, how about I put packages so I can help them on the PR and the media exposure, since I've been doing this and I started from scratch and I've been attending multiple conferences, learning everything left and right. So that was my approach. And the reason why I actually wanted to talk about this in today's session is because a lot of podcasters out there think that the only way you'd be able to monetize your podcast, it's only selling ads, which that's amazing. You can do that, but for the ads, you need those 1,000 downloads. But what if your content is actually really great, but you're just coming from zero PR and it's going to take you a couple of years to build that PR and to build that strategy? But over here, you would be hired in a heartbeat from a company because you have the skills, but you just want to maybe start a side hustle, or maybe start a business, or maybe start having extra income for a project that you want, whatever the reason might want to be. Another great way how you'd be able to monetize it is to leverage all your skills that you have, and you can either pitch it or expose those skills or those packages that you have to people that you create on your new network from podcasting, to your guests. If your guests don't need it, always let them know, hey, if you know anybody that is in need of such services, this is what I do. Please refer them to me. At first, you can even give a referral fee. Like if a guest refers you somebody, if let's say one package is $500, I'll give you $100. For $100, it's still a profit. And you have to start somewhere, because a lot of podcast hosts just overwhelm themselves and think only ads is the only way how you would be able to make money. And this is the R&D approaches of it are just one portion. We have speaking gigs, we have courses that you can sell online. There's so much more that you can branch out. But I think it's absolutely important for you to start to see what skills you have, how you can leverage those skills to the max, how would you be able to improve your own skills, because I may be really great at sales, but so much is changing that I still need to improve myself. I hope I'm explaining everything in a proper English, because I have foreign moments a lot too. But I think it's important for podcast hosts to know that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everything's coming across perfectly clear. And I think sort of a quick summary of that is podcasting is complicated, right? That's probably the most simplistic way of putting it, because you have research and you have your audience and you have social media and you have the back end production, then you have the marketing part of it, the PR, and then if you're simply looking to do it as a hobby, fine, you don't have to worry about monetization if you just want to kind of cover your costs. But if you want to make it as far as like a real side hustle, or your essentially 9 to 5, it comes with a lot of pressure and a lot of things that we're not all good at. I, for one,
well, that's just the and sorry for interrupting, but I want to add, those are just the back end of what you need to do after you produce the content.
Right.
Content creation, that's a whole jungle on its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you go into the whole marketing and pushing for listeners and all that other stuff and monetization. There's so much going on, and it's just incredible, because I know, for one, I'm not good at graphic design. It's like I need somebody to help me with that. I am really good at certain things, and Steve helps us out on the technological side, and we have other people that serve as a resource. And I think when you talk about visiting different podcast conferences and kind of being in the weeds there and understanding what podcasters need, in order to get to that next level, you're in the mix and you're having those conversations. That's really the only way to find out, how to make those connections. And absolutely, you're talking about referrals here. It's like, hey, I know so-and-so that's really good at this angle of the post-production kind of thing. So yeah, I think you're definitely on a right track. It's super complicated. There's so much going on. It's just not simply hit record and release. There's so much more going on to that.
If it was just that, it would be so much more, so much more free time on my end and for my team. The easiest way how I always say it, just think about this to the audience or people that already have a podcast and they're in early stages. The pioneers can definitely agree with me on this, or somebody that is looking to open a podcast. Think about, for 10-minute final episode of 10-minute, a minimum of 1 hour end work. So it's minimum 6 times of the final product. So that's how podcasting works. It's not just a flip of a switch. It's not just record and go. It's 6 times minimum of the final product.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a fair average to assume, and it's a lot of work. It's research, it's recording, it's finding the guest if you have an interview style, or and it's so much involved, and that's what I think. One thing we do tend to do at International Podcast Day and with Podcaster Showcases, and to at least provide individuals out there in the space that people can connect with and sort of leverage. So let's go ahead and dive into it. I know you had mentioned just a few in R&D approaches that we can use to leverage our skills. How do you want to start this? Do you want to maybe share some of the skills? Do you want to look at the approaches first? Where do you want to go with it?
Yeah, absolutely. So my main one, so I'll share the main one that I personally use, and I've talked about this to everybody that I'm like very open to talk about. So what I do, because we did mention a little bit, if you do have, for instance, interviews with guests, one thing that I want to make sure is whenever I'm talking to somebody, it's not a first timer. It's not like, hey, meet me on Zoom at this time and we'll hit record. I would like that exchange at first to make sure, because my type of interviews are very dive in. Sometimes I do get personal, depending on the topic that we're trying to cover. So my R&D approach for converting guests to clients specifically, it's 3 steps. I have the pre-interviews, which would be me and the guest to go ahead and talk about everything that we're going to cover in the interview. It's the actual interview, and then is the post-production call that I have with them, and that's where the pitch comes from. So that is one approach, because research and development, I did the research, I had the the pre-interview with them, I talked with them about everything we're going to cover, and I also asked them, what is your team missing? Is there something I can help with? What would be some goals for you to see? Where do you see the business going on in a year from now or 5 years? Because sometimes, especially during COVID, people were thinking a year from now. We weren't even thinking about a 5 to 10-year-old goal. So even if you ask a year from now, how I would be able to help you? You do the research, and then you develop these packages, and that's where you'd be able to pitch it. Number one, that you would be able to convert guests into clients. And if your guests cannot be clients, then of course you would be able to pitch it to do the referral process, just like I was explaining. Another R&D approach that you'd be able, and I'm kind of going through them, there's multiple ones. I'm just going to cover mainly of what I use, because people sometimes don't even think about these approaches. So that would be one area. If I'm going too fast, please feel more than free to tell me to slow down, because sometimes I put a 5th gear and I just keep going.
No, I think we're good. Yeah, keep on going.
The other one that you'd be able to do whenever you talk to clients, whenever you talk to, people on podcast guests or communities, Facebook communities, or whenever you do research online about something that you're trying to find out, but maybe you're frustrated because this information is not out there, right? Here's the thing. How about you go ahead and put to play and actually come with the best approaches and the best results how to do such a thing. So for instance, if you are a podcaster and you've been podcasting for quite some time, but at the very beginning, there was not a step-by-step tutorial that you were able to see, or somebody did not tell you how to organize your content correctly, and you learned by your own mistakes, and you now needed to pay for your own mistakes, and you wish somebody else told you this, right? Well, all this knowledge that you have gained so far, you can convert that into an ebook. You can convert that into an online course. You can convert that into a Patreon account. You can convert all the knowledge that you gain from your skills to monetize your expertise. Because sometimes we just sit on the knowledge that we have, that's it. But this is just podcasting. You have people. I come from the sales background, right? So my course is on sales, is mastering the law of sales, is going through the whole sales funnel, what sales tactic to use for decision maker, leads, decision maker, pitches, and sales, because that's my background. I use the podcast as a great platform to go out there and push it even more and be able to let the audience know, like, hey, this is me. I have interviews strategically put for the content of the podcast. So this way I would also be able to promote my sales and marketing skills so people know I'm an expert at what I'm trying to sell. So that's another way that you'd be able to leverage it through courses. And so far, I've not mentioned selling ads, because people think selling ads is the only way. It's not. So we have talked about R&D approaches that you can have packages with your own clients. We have talked about courses that you can sell your expertise. You can insert an ad on your own podcast, or you'd be able to talk to other podcasts that you think it's in the area of what type of course you're trying to sell, and maybe make a deal with them to promote or to give you a shout out at their own podcast. Give a shout out to each other, convert those so you grow the exposure in there. So different marketing tactics there. So again, R&D approaches for guest to client, courses. Third one, public speaking. People have not even untapped to public speaking. If you would love to get into public speaking, first thing you want to do is, and if you have zero PR, if you're brand new, is start a podcast. People are not going to hire you on a heartbeat for public speaking. You will do public speaking, but you'd have to do a lot of free public speaking in order to get paid ones. If you start promoting yourself and putting yourself to the expert level before somebody will hire you, that will tune into your podcast and see if you even make sense when you talk, or the way that you talk. How is your pitch? How is your tone? How, if you have a YouTube video, how is your body language? Is this something that, our audience would love to talk about? Is this something that our firm would love to hear her on? So that would be an amazing, SEOs do its own thing as well too. That would be also an amazing thing to put yourself and highlight yourself that you can be a public speaker. After you do that, you also make sure not only your podcast, but you go on other people's podcasts to be interviewed. Number one, because that's also important. Number two, a platform that people don't talk about a lot, it's espeakers.com. It's literally where companies, organizations go to find speakers. So put a profile, make your profile, put your profile there. You would be able to get different speaking fees depending on your expertise. The longer you're in the field, the more your fee is going to be. The more expert you become at it, the better fee the larger fee you'd be able to charge. But you're like, okay, Romina, this is kind of cool, right? But I never spoke in public. I'm gonna freeze out. It's okay. That's why you go ahead and do a couple of free ones before. That's why you get the practice. So your first speaking gig, let's say you're getting a $5,000, a $3,000, right? A first speaking gig, and you freeze. They're not going to call you back, buddy. I'm sorry to break it to you. So you need some free ones. You need some practice. My first one, I went to YMCA. I froze. It was a Friday night. My friend makes fun of me. I asked her to come with me as a support system. She literally has a recording and she makes fun of me every day. She roasts me over it. But if I didn't smash my face there, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing. So those are 3 ones right there that you would be able to leverage towards podcasting. Again, research what you're good at. Do deep research. Analyze yourself. Try to know yourself. Study it, and then go ahead and develop packages for it. And it would be projects that you really need to take your time and dive in and actually try to make the best out of it. But don't also expect that the first project that you launch is going to be successful. Probably the third or the fourth one will end up being successful. I'm just going to be honest about it.
Right, absolutely. And it's just like you said, your third or fourth project's going to maybe be the most successful, just like your third or fourth public speaking engagement is probably going to be your better one. I think so many times, not just podcasters, but as individuals, when we try and hone a skill, we want to be perfect before we can take the stage. Yeah. And that's not it. I mean, I started podcasting in 2009, and Steve and I and my brother Mikey, who recorded, we were not great podcasters. We weren't even great public speakers at the time. It was just, 3 family members getting together and just kind of having a conversation about technology. And then over the years, we've been able to hone that, and I've been able to get a few speaking gigs. Like you said, you've spoken at PodFest, I've spoken at PodFest. Now we do International Podcast Day, and also it translates into presentations that you do at work, whether that's for a sales gig, whether that's for a safety presentation. That could be a presentation in front of management, in front of your coworkers, whatever it is. It's like understanding the context. It's like I have to work on these skills in order to get to that next level. And as you said, 3 or 4 steps it may take you to get there. It's okay. It's all right to fail. It's okay, like you said, to sort of smash your face. And when you have friends kind of remind you of that, it's like, this is where I was and this is where I now am. And I think that sometimes putting that into some perspective is really helpful.
And another thing that I would like to add, like I said, I'm Albanian, and For people that live in America, I would say we are blessed. And let me explain to you why. Because if you live in smaller countries like Albania, I'm just going to take that because I grew up there, right? If you had a failed project or a failed business or a failed, anything, that would be your tagline. That would be, oh, this is Romina. She had a business, but she failed at it, right? In America, you get a chance to learn from your failures, and people cheer you to fail to learn from your mistakes and go further with that. So I would absolutely leverage also the culture that you live in, because it's not the same in Albania. Number one. Number two, podcasting, it's not even at its surface level of what it's going to be able to do 10, 15 years down the road. This is still early for you to jump in the podcasting world, because number one, you will have me, Dave, Podfest community, Podfiesta community, podcast movement community, all these communities, they literally have forums for free online that if you have a question, we will jump in and help you. If I had a business and Dave had a business at the same time, and if we're competitors, I would not tell him what to do. I love you, but I wouldn't tell you exactly what to do because I want my business to do better. Podfest community is the only community I have seen. People will literally share with you what works, what doesn't work for free, and are cheering on for you to a whole nother extreme. So it's the best free media to promote yourself, to build a brand behind your name, and to be able to build an empire, honestly. And I know I get very passionate when I talk about this, because also another thing that I want to say is, if you Google my name 2 years ago, only my personal Facebook page would come out. And probably my dumb pictures when I was 15 years old. I'll just be honest, right? We all have them. We grew up in a digital age. Google my name right now. You would be able to have Google pages on and on and on and on about my interviews, about speaking gigs, about projects, about articles. So right now, I'm not nobody that I was before. If I want to apply for a project, or if I want to go back to corporate, or if somebody wants to look me up for a speaking gig, it's let me just Google her. Everybody Googles everyone, you guys. We literally Google phone numbers when they call us. That's how it is. We Google everything.
That is true.
So that's also a really great way for you to build a PR behind your name. And you don't have to do a podcast weekly. You can do it bi-weekly too. It adds up. If your time cannot afford it, go ahead and do it bi-weekly. But also at the same time, don't hold yourself back to wait for the content to be 100% correct. If you listen to my first couple of episodes, I am so sorry you are listening to them. They suck. The content is there, but the audio quality is not. You also learn with the experience. So a lot of people hold back. Well, we'll wait for the perfect day. Well, someday. We'll make it someday. Someday is not a day, you guys. So just take action and just launch it, and you'll learn from it. And even if you end up shutting down your podcast, hands down, respect to you. But take all this knowledge that you took from podcasting production, because it's literally a business on its own, and apply it to your everyday business.
Yeah, I think that's really important to make that connection between, your podcasting and your business. And it's one of those things where we always want to get it right the first time, right? We want to know what the perfect length is. We want to know what the correct day to release the episode. We want to know all these different things. What's the best social media platform to use? What's the best guest to get, and all this stuff. And it's you just have to keep plugging away. You have to find out what works for your audience. You have to work to see what skills that you can capitalize. And it's a very tricky situation, but as you're saying, you're giving us a lot of advice when it comes to a lot of different approaches and tricks that you can use to try and leverage a lot of that.
Yeah, and another thing that I'd like to add, though, because you can play around with it, but please be true to yourself. I've seen podcasters have a podcast on X, Y, or Z, and I know them in person. I'm just huh? That's not who you are. Why are you giving fake advice? Please be true to yourself. And number one, be true to yourself. Number two, launch original ideas. If you copy the ideas, your idea will suck because somebody else had the original idea for it. Number three, do a quick checkpoints. What worked, what didn't work. Have an accountability buddy. I have accountability buddies. I had 2 successful podcast hosts that have, international known podcasts that we do monthly checkups. Hey, what worked for you this month? What didn't work? What can we help you with? Sometimes it's more like, hey, we're good. Anything new? Be like, no, it's a dry month. We have nothing new. Cool. Sometimes we have a list of things that we want to go over. So those are absolutely very important. And have an open mindset and be coachable, please. It's absolutely very important for you to improve not only on podcasting, but just in life to be coachable. If somebody is trying to give you a criticism towards an episode, of course, you have to see it where they're coming from, what's their expertise on the field. I had people before that were like, your podcast name sucks. And I'm like, cool. Did you check out the episode? Which episode did you like? Or I had people say like, oh, your voice is very weird. I'm like, not a problem. Don't listen to my podcast. There will be people out there that will not like what you do. So whenever you get those criticism, if it's a criticism directly to you, then just avoid it. But if it's actually a helpful feedback, go ahead and digest it and be open to see like how would you be able to leverage it? How would you be able to apply to your business or to your podcasting or even to your daily life? Sometimes we're like, oh, I'm going to wear the podcast host hat and I'm the expert and I don't need your opinion. In Albania, we have this expression that if you start liking yourself, might as well, if you start liking yourself and you think your brain is the best, might as well lit your brain on fire because that's when you're just not even going to be able to produce anymore. I try to translate it correctly, but I hope I deliver the core message of it.
No, I think that's really important. I do think you're being open-minded and coachable and kind of having the bigger picture in mind and really not just essentially, thinking of yourself as, having this giant ego. And I think it's important. I think it's going back to your one point about being able to reach out to communities and accountability partners and accountability buddies. It's, we get siloed too frequently. And this involves podcasters, it involves business, it involves our personal life, and we just sort of put ourselves in this container, into this silo, and we're in there. It's just this vacuum, and we keep second doubting ourselves, and we come up with ideas, but they're not vetted properly because we're not asking people for their opinions. We're not asking people to assist us. And I think it's super important in this industry. And as you said, we have International Podcast Day, we have individuals like you, we have Podfiesta who are willing to give you advice, you know, and to open yourselves up. But again, be open-minded, be coachable, get yourselves out of that silo, start asking those questions, and
or do surveys too, even with your community. Like I produced a podcast episode that's coming out soon about what entrepreneurs would like their partners to know and what entrepreneurs' partners would like their entrepreneur partner to know, because it's such an entrepreneurship, it's such a trendy word and a trendy thing to be, but like people don't realize how much work goes into it. And sometimes for an entrepreneur, it's hard to find a partner or to keep that healthy relationship because their brain is very different. It's go, go, go. And it just, keeps popping up new ideas when their partner might not understand where they're coming from. And also, if you are in a relationship with an entrepreneur as a partner, what would you like to see on your entrepreneur partner? Would you like to see the results? Would you like to see them actually once a week take time and actually devote it to you? Would you like for them to involve you a lot more? So this feels like a partnership. So I did a survey on it, which I'm launching the article in the episode, and I reached out to my guests. All of them are entrepreneurs. I was like, would you please take a moment and complete the survey, this Google form for you? And also, can you please have your spouse complete it? I do not need the names. Can you just please complete it? Because I would like to see the data from it. So this way I'll be able to dive in a little bit more. Because again, I tried to Google search this and it was not out there. Also, another thing that I tried to Google search, and we talked with Alex and Filippo a little bit, which I'm doing a whole another episode for it, is entrepreneurship loneliness. People don't talk about it. Or entrepreneurship depression. People don't talk about it. So again, survey. Here you go. Let me see the results. So if you see something is missing, go ahead and be the solution provider for it. Why not? It doesn't mean that you will find the solution, but you can survey it. You can do research more. You can reach out to more people about it. That's what I mean by try to be solution oriented. And that's, for example, those type of content, those would be amazing content because people are trying to Google search it and they're not. And here's also another thing that unfortunately it sucks, but it is true. Those type of topics are not promoted as much because those type of topics don't sell. The idea of entrepreneurship and running your business sells, but to get down to the nitty-gritty of it doesn't sell as much. Running a podcast, making a podcast idea sells. How to produce content, people not going to talk about it. Gets to the nitty gritty. So when it gets to the juicy details, go ahead and go after those type of details, because also there's a lot of untapped potential you can monetize from right there.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I was just sharing on the screen your conversation you mentioned with Alex Sanfilippo, and that was a really good Q&A that I was able to share with our community. And yeah, I think it's very important when you talk about surveying and collecting data and really like honing in on that. It's just not simply post on your social media accounts and like answer this question. You know, it's like you said.
Plus, I'm a numbers person, so I'm like, I want the numbers.
Exactly. Yeah, you need some data. You need some number to kind of solidify and sort of create a direction. And again, you have to formalize it. Put it in Google form. Reach out to your contacts and reach out to your contacts not in a way of like, I'm trying to collect more, say emails for my newsletter or something like that. You're trying to figure out some data and some direction for either a business or whatever. And I think surveying is a very underutilized tool, I think, in podcasting. And I think, utilizing those skills that whether you have with data collection or surveying could very much, really tune in if you from a podcaster perspective, as far as your audience, maybe what they're looking for. As you said, maybe something that you're saying in your podcast isn't coming across as authentic, as you mentioned. It's like, why are you podcasting about that? Maybe this causes a little bit of change in direction. And I think for your entrepreneurship analogy there, or your conversation, it's, trying to find out and provide that data to your business partners, when it comes time to, if you're looking at getting into this field, whether it be finance or sales or podcasting or government, whatever it be, these are the things that you need to know on the back end, whether it's your spouse, or your partners, or whatever. So I think it's very important that surveying is sort of at the, one of those quick, easy approaches you can do. When, of course, well thought out, great questions is imperative there.
Yeah, I mean, I did a survey when we had PodFest Global. So I had my speaking portion and I had a case study. So for the case study, I did business podcast relationship and its growth. So I send a survey to all my guests that have a business or have a podcast, or people that I know had a business and podcast, and somehow this two correlate with one another. So questions were as simple as, did you launch your business or your podcast first? How have you seen your business grow from launching the podcast? What's the average yearly expense that you have with different categories? How much have you seen your business grow with percentage of it? What would be the exact percentage of time? Like, do you outsource it or do you keep the podcast editing in-house? What would be one piece of advice that you can give to podcasters? So all this data, by reading all the data, when I looked at it, I'm like, okay, like 70% doesn't outsource the podcast editing, 30% does. So as a podcast production company, I'm like, so you're telling me 70% of them don't. So that looks like right there, I'm like, podcast editing, right? That's like one of the quickest jobs that you can get for podcasters. So people that are really great at audio, or college students, for instance, that are studying audio or business, why are you not reaching out to different podcasts? You can literally Google it and say, hey, like, teach yourself Audacity. For goodness sake, just teach yourself Audacity, or just do some place with it. Hey, I would love to edit your podcast. I would be able to do it for X amount of money. Right there, as a college student, for instance, you just found yourself a job that you can work from home to be able to leverage some more money. Number one, it adds to your resume. Number two, you learn a lot more. Number three, if you're good, once you start doing more and more referrals. So that's how my brain looks at it. If I see something missing, or if I read the data, I don't look at that, okay, this is just the data. I look at it, what other business opportunities we can have from here, how we'd be able to close this gap at the same time. So that's how I hope everybody starts thinking that way, whoever is listening to this interview, because not only in business, but even in life, that's how you're going to start approaching things. When something bad happens, or when something is missing, you don't look at it as, oh, well, we'll just take it. No, this is an opportunity. A problem is an opportunity for you to look at other solutions for it.
Yeah, I know off the top of my head at least 5 podcast friends that got into the audio editing business for that exact reason. They understood that 70% as that's an opportunity, and they've built.
And this is just 100 people that I interviewed. There's millions of podcasts out there.
Right.
This is just 100 people that I surveyed for it.
Yeah, absolutely, and you have that opportunity, and yeah, college students is a great opportunity. We've connected with a few in the past, and yeah, there's so much good talent out there that can get these things done in seconds compared to hours. You
Yeah.
know,
And I say college student because I like whenever I would go to school, and I'm still going to school. I graduate in December, so I'm doing everything at the same time. But I say college student because as a college student, that's what I was looking for. I was looking for convenient freelancer jobs that I can work from home, make good money, but learn from the experience too, not necessarily just get that hourly and just, okay, cool, I'm done, goodbye. Like, learn from experience, because what's going to happen, we're also living in an economy. I had this interesting conversation actually with a good friend of mine recently that we're going to see an economical shift and a career shift because of COVID that we are not even, tapping to it right now. But everything is turning electronic. Everything is turning remote. And people are not staying anymore in the same job for 5, 10, or 20 years. People are staying in the jobs 1 to 2 years. They're getting as much as they can, taking all this knowledge, going somewhere else. 1 to 2 years, taking this knowledge, going somewhere else, or maybe launching their own thing. So if you are brand new or at a young age, if you start a podcast even once a month, you guys, or if you start doing editing, or if you start somehow entering yourself in the business world, all this knowledge that you took, you can go ahead and convert this to money and a better career down the road. So if the younger you start, the better it is, but it's never too late to be able to leverage those. Or this type of jobs would be great for like people, like moms that work from home and they're very techie, because moms are superwomen. They can do everything. That's
yeah,
a really great
that's
opportunity too.
absolutely true. I think what you're hitting at is gaining as many transferable skills as possible.
Yeah.
In that communication's one, public speaking's one, audio editing is one, video production can be one. As you said, anything that's technologically related, utilizing that skill in your particular job set now, maybe improving it with a little bit of things on the side if you have the time and you have the effort and the energy to do so, but continually build that resume so that, you have 15, 20 transferable skills from job one to job two. And so you're, as you mentioned, you're not particularly like quote unquote stuck in your position for the next 10, 15, 20 years. You've built up your resume, you've built up your talents and your skills, and you can take those approaches and those opportunities and skills that you've had and transfer those into another position. I think that's extremely valuable. And I think that one of the things that's I think is being talked about more within the podcasting space is what podcasts can do for your business, what it can do for your general employment, what it can do when you're looking for employees to hire. It's something that's finally sort of coming to the surface, and I think it deserves a lot of attention.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's very typical right now for a business to have a podcast. If they don't, I'll pitch them to open a podcast for them. It's a very normal thing right now for a business to have a podcast, because this way also you got to think about the social responsibility that is developing around the world, and people now want to know who they're buying from more than what the product is. So everything is, it's a domino effect. If you have a business, launch a podcast, even if it's just one episode a month, you guys. Launch a podcast so people know what you sell in your business. People know the owner. They feel related. They feel like they have the friend on the inside. If you're going to tap a little bit into the sales world, they feel like they have a friend on the inside. So they're going to buy from you, even if the competitor down the road was a little bit cheaper, but they like you because they saw your face. They matched the face with the name, with the company. They like what you had to say. They like your character, what you serve. They're going to go with you. So they're just one of many more examples also how it's going to be able to leverage the business and grow the revenue at the end of the year.
Yeah, I actually find it interesting as I listen to podcasts and I hear other business owners say as a guest, and I'm like, I wish this person had a podcast, because I would listen to them every day. Like they have great personalities and they have a great message, and like you said, you get to know them, you get to know the inside workings of a business, and I'm always let down a little bit when there's a company I really want to follow and get to know more, and I'm like, oh man, if I can just get even an hour a week or an hour a month.
See, that's a business opportunity. I would just email them and be like, hey, I think you should open a podcast. I'm sure a lot of people agree with me here. Give it a try. 6 months. Let's see how it does. A year.
Yeah, exactly. And I've known plenty of other businesses that have done that, and some of them have either pod faded, or they just didn't think they were getting the amount of traction that they would, so be it. But I think I'll take your advice there and reach out and be like, hey, I really enjoyed this conversation on this podcast. I'd like to hear more from you, because it's something, it's the message and the story about the business, how it founded, where they're going, what they're doing for, for the environment, all these things. So yeah, again,
or another thing you can do. We're talking about a lot of R&D approaches here. You can do about monetizing. Another thing you can do, if you feel like their message is very strong and a lot of people can absolutely relate with it, and if you can think about 2 to 3 other individuals, you can put a webinar with them. You can put a webinar, and that content, you can leverage it and turn it into an ebook.
Yeah, I've noticed webinars are obviously growing in popular and have been popular in the educational space, whether it's higher education, elementary school education, high school, whatever it is. And there's plenty of people that own their own business just based on webinar series, and like your course, for sales, they, whether it's like a classroom management or it's, social emotional learning or mathematics, whatever it is, and they've built their business based on this opportunity, this need. And I think webinars, they seem to grow, and maybe I'm out of touch with it. They seem to grow in popularity, a couple years ago, and then it's kind of shrunk, and now it's coming back. So I don't know if that's the push,
it came
like you
back
said, with
during COVID. Yeah, it came back during COVID because a lot of people were doing webinars during COVID. But if you got to think about it, how much podcasting has grown, even like last year, people were stuck at home, and I literally had like people like reach out to me and be like, thank you so much for, I remember one of them made me tear up. It was this professor from a Texas university, and he had listened to an episode with Kenneth Cloak, one of my guests, where we talked about conflict resolution. And he emailed me, he said, thank you so much for putting this. I feel like I'm stuck at home teaching my students online, and I love attending conferences. I've been listening to your podcast. And he's like, but this one kind of hit me like I was in a conference listening to a conference. He's like, I get chills. And he's like, thank you so much. You made me feel alive for a second. So that just one out of other emails that I got, that one just got to me because I love conferences. I'm a conference girl. I will literally go to every conference possible because I love networking and learning more. So everything is turning electronic, you guys. Like the business person that you said that you love to learn more about, even if they do season, right? 10 episode a season, 10 episode the other record, they batch record everything. How much more traffic would they get that way? Whenever they publish their new book, they do an online course, if they do a conference or anything like that, you have extra layers already built in the PR. You don't start from scratch.
Yeah, it's true. I'm thinking a lot about what you're talking about here, and there's I grew up listening to a lot of music, and there's a particular recording studio that's up in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle, and this recording company re-released or they started a new podcast, and this was probably about 2 years ago, and I've listened to every single episode since then because it brings me back also to sort of the nostalgia of the early 90s and in the early 2000s about where I was, what I was experiencing. And I think that was a really great approach that they took. Say, we still have a captive audience with our music studio in our company, and they were able to capitalize and bring on all these old guests and musicians from like 15-20 years ago. I was like right back in high school and early college years, and again, there's a connection there's an opportunity. They're like, hey, we can do this. All of a sudden you start seeing ads in there. They're seeing more revenue based on their new artists, which they're showcasing. They're seeing more revenues from some of the old vinyls that they're re-releasing, and
they
all these
woke
old
up
artists.
An audience that was there. It just was not tapped for quite some time. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, and I think
that's a great strategy. Absolutely. Yeah,
it's a perfect approach, a great strategy. And I think if you're maybe within one of those industries now, you can reconsider everything. Everything's cyclical, right? Everything comes back 10, 15, 20 years later, and it's just, if you can time it right, if you're aware of the audience and the mechanisms out there, including podcasting, as you said, webinars and various courses and series, you can capitalize and you can make a business out of it. And it's pretty impressive if you time it right and you do your research. It's going to be it's going to turn out really well.
Yeah, and even if it fails, learn your lesson. Second time, you're going to do better. Third time, you're going to do better. Like, I love it when, for example, when Chris Krimitsos talks about Podfest, he says we had 17 people the first one?
Yeah,
and
we sure did.
They just got a Guinness World Record for having the highest number of attendees for an online conference. 7 years ago, it was 17 people.
Yep, in it was a small little theater or a
Yeah.
conference room or
Yeah, it
something
was
like
a
that.
small
Yeah.
little conference room. Yeah.
Yeah, like he always says, start ugly. And it's
Exactly.
like you got to start somewhere. And yeah, we've Chris, he's developed the quite the enterprise over there, and yeah, he's a showcase, of
An
what can
amazing
happen.
job. Yeah.
Yeah,
He does an amazing job. Like all the time when I'm like, hey, like I'm stuck in here. Do you have any advice? He is very relatable, and that's how you need to be, very relatable. Whenever you see a problem, think for a solution. And no matter what, we all have our down days. I'm not saying here that everything is flowers, because it's not. Because everything was flower, it would be like, oh, la la la, I'm in the la la land. No, you
right.
guys. You need those down days also to appreciate and to also know how good you are and how strong you are when it comes to your business, to your podcasting, or life, whatever you do.
Absolutely. Well, Romina, let's go ahead and wrap up this conversation. We've had great, 45, 50 minutes of chatting about all these different R&D approaches and it's sprinkled out throughout this entire conversation. So maybe what are the last, maybe couple points that you want to make as we look at some of these approaches, and we've covered a lot, how we can leverage these, starting a business via podcasting. I'll kind of give you the final word here as we kind of wrap up this session.
Yeah, so to kind of summarize it, because we did talk about different approaches. So to kind of summarize it, the first one is to try to get packages that you think your guests can definitely benefit from. So have packages that you can sell, number one. Number two would be to launch courses with your field of expertise, whatever you're a really great expert at. It doesn't have to be $100, $200 course. It can be even a $29 course, but if you sell it multiple times, of course, it multiplies. The third one would be absolutely speaking gigs. And podcasting is a really great platform for you to build your reputation, build your PR, and build a brand behind your name. The fourth one we talked about, I feel like there are so many of them. The fourth one we talked about is launching a business from doing podcast editing. Try to do a little small job. Even if you're not a podcaster yourself, you can always learn more. The fifth one, how many did we go through? Because I feel like we touched base on a lot of them.
Yeah, those were the four. I'm sure we're kind of missing a couple.
And I had one that I wanted to mention, but it flew my mind. But yeah, there's a lot of approaches, you guys. Listen to this whole interview one more time. Listen to this interview one more time. There's a lot of approaches, absolutely, to go ahead and go about R&D for podcasting. But if I can give one message to everybody, though, is don't wait for things to be perfect. Just start ugly, take action, and just go for it and learn throughout the way. Because sometimes we overwhelm ourselves. We wait for the smallest, for everything to be perfect. I literally, I was in a corner of a room doing my podcast editing before. I would have to go in my bedroom, readjust my room every single time. Tomorrow my podcast will be 2 years old, but I had to literally readjust, and there was wires everywhere. So it would take me an hour to set it up and 30 minutes to put it together. Sometimes I'll shove them all in a plastic box because I was so tired after working a full-time job. So just go for it. If you really want to, just go for it. And another thing too, I keep saying another thing, but I think this is also important, is that a lot of people get in their own head when it comes to numbers. If you don't have a big PR behind you, or if you're starting from scratch, don't get yourself down just by your download numbers, because literally the one person can listen to it and that person can change the trajectory of your life. So don't get yourself, oh, I have only 500 or I have only 10,000 downloads. Joe Rogan over here is this much. Joe Rogan is the Fear Factor guy, you guys. He didn't start podcasting, okay? He started from scratch too. He builds every day. And whenever you see also these big deals, Call Her Daddy just got bought by Spotify for $60 million. Look at that. Know that there's money on the podcasting. Put in the work. Devote yourself. Readjust and pivot when you have to, and you'll be just fine. I promise you.
Everybody starts from scratch, and everybody has to build every day. I love that comment about having to build every day. It's absolutely true. Followings for International Podcast Day, these communities we've talked about, but Pod Fiesta, they've started year in, year out, day after day. They're putting in the work. Maybe some days you're putting in 3-4 minutes. Maybe the next day you're putting 3-4 hours in. But they're doing the work. And like you said, you got to start somewhere. Grow consistently. Be smart with your decisions. And as you said, you create packages, courses to sell. Go to espeakers.com for some speaking gigs. Find out those small little opportunities. Maybe those slivers within some of that data that you can look at and say, hey, maybe this is a really good opportunity for for us.
Yeah.
So,
and ask. If the answer is no, no is next, or no means just not yet. Don't be afraid to get no's, because sometimes coming from a sales world, like I don't fear no's. Like I'm like, okay, well, we'll try again later. Ask. Just ask, you guys. Don't overthink it. Just go for it.
Excellent. Well, I do want to give you the opportunity to mention your course today, and I'll go ahead and share this on the screen, and I'll let you share away with what you're doing over there.
Yeah, absolutely. So the course, it's over 40 videos of course material, over 5 hours of course material. What I did is I condensed all my sales experience. I've worked construction sales, B2B sales. I've worked B2C sales, door-to-door sales, automotive sales, inside sales. So sales experience by a lot there. What I was able to do is there is a set funnel that you see in the sales world, which is leads, decision maker, pitches, and sales. And a lot of times companies, if they have existing customers, or companies they're trying to get new customers, and they already have a way how to generate leads, right? But what's missing is that once you put those leads through the funnel, that's where that conversion goes bad. So what I've done with this course is I went through all the sales tactics, because there are books out there left and right telling you about this tactics, but you're like, where do I apply this tactic for where? So if you break it down, let's say you have 100 leads, you have 50 decision makers, 20 pitches, and 1 sale. This course will teach you where you're missing at and what tactics you need to practice to up the conversion, to up that bracket. And it goes one by one. And to help out even more at the end, it has movie negotiation scenes, which I have the YouTube video link in it. Of course, copyrights, I cannot just put a movie scene on a private course, but I'll be able to break it down. And after I've gone all through, all the tactics of sales, I would be like, okay, they used 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I'm going to need you to do from now on, since you know how to, you learn these tactics, now you can detect these tactics. When people are using it with you, you'd be able how to overcome them. And you'd be able to also be an expert at how to use them. This way you increase your sales conversion at the same time. So that's what the course is. I recorded it in my office. It's everybody that I've had the course so far, I've got nothing but positive feedback from it. And each video, it's about 10 to 15 minutes long. Some videos are 30 minutes long because it gets really nitty gritty to the juicy details. So I would absolutely advise everybody to go there. And it would be connect with Romina/courses. You guys would be able to automatically connect there.
That's awesome. Well, Romina, I want to thank you so much. I'm going to share your website again, connectwithromina.com. As you can see on the screen, you've been featured. We've mentioned Pod Fiesta, HR Florida, Podfest, Startup Grind. There's been so many opportunities you've been able to speak with founder, CEO, producer, host, consultant extraordinaire. I'm not sure how many other adjectives and words I can put before you. But I want to thank you so much for getting out in front of the Podcast Day community and really sharing a wide variety of R&D approaches that we can use to leverage our skills on starting a business via podcasting. There's an incredible array, I should say, of opportunities out there, and you've just showcased a few of those. But your talents are amazing, and I want to thank you for being part of this broadcast and this team today.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I want to clarify, you guys, if you're looking at this, you're like, what in the world is this goldish thing in here? That's not an S or a 5. It's a 2, actually, but it's flipped. Did a photo shoot. If you guys want to connect with me on social, watch the photo shoot and also the funny videos that were recorded yesterday for the 2-year anniversary. Feel more than free to do so. Coffee with Romina or connect with Romina everywhere. You'd be able to find me.
Yeah, that's great. I'm really excited for you. Congratulations on your 2-year.
Thank you.
It's so much fun. I'm glad you're part of this industry. I'm glad you're part of the space. And I did drop links within the comments for everybody to connect with you. So make sure you get over there and do that. So Romina, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, everybody. Well, thanks again for joining the June edition of the Podcaster Showcase. We'll be back next month as we're going to be tapping into some more voices and some more podcasters from around the world. So once again, thank you and have a good day.